My name is Jonathan Hargreaves and I work for TRN Training. The topic of this session is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to see yourself clearly and objectively through reflection and introspection. It means looking for patterns in the way we tend to make sense of the world that surrounds us. It means understanding our own emotions and moods. And so instead of trying to avoid or fix how we feel, we observe and stay curious about our feelings, even the difficult, uncomfortable ones. And it means paying attention to how we tend to act and behave in certain situations. Self-awareness means paying attention to and trying to learn about our own psychology. So what are the benefits of self-awareness? It's difficult to ask for what we want and need in a relationship when we're not very clear about these things ourselves. The less self-aware we are, the likelihood is that we will have a defensive mindset with other people, which is a recipe for disaster. Our mood and how we tend to feel hour to hour is largely dependent on how we choose to think and behave. When we improve our awareness between thought, behavior, and emotion, it becomes much easier to regulate our feelings and moods. Poor decision making often comes from muddled thought and strong emotional reactions. When we become more aware of our habits of thought and feeling, we can more readily regulate our short-term impulses as well as our long-term values and goals. Achieving a clearer sense of what you believe and what you really want makes it far easier to communicate in any aspect of life, whether it's with a partner, manager, or best friend. The better we know ourselves, the easier it is to communicate assertively, to be honest about what you like, and to be respectful of the wishes of others. The most common cause of procrastination and poor productivity isn't necessarily through a lack of effort or commitment. It's interference from ourselves. When we struggle to get to work, it's usually because on some level, our own thoughts, emotions, or habits are getting in the way. What I'd like to do is take a look at some of the means that we can improve our self-awareness. Let's start with meditate on your mind. These are ways to practice mindfulness right now. Stop what you're doing and take a breath. Take a moment to notice the sensation of your breath. Put down that phone and laptop. Find a place to sit that feels calm and quiet to you, and set a time limit and do one thing at a time. Find mindful moments in everyday tasks and notice the moves that you make. Notice your body and notice when your mind has wandered. Be kind to your wandering mind and close with kindness. Pay attention to what bothers you about other people. Often the things that irritate us the most in other people reflect some quality we dislike in ourselves. We all have aspects of ourselves that we're not proud of, such as a tendency to bend the truth a little too often, or maybe we avoid conflict like the plague, often ending up feeling like a doormat or getting used by those that surround us. If we don't know how or believe it's possible to change these things, we can end up doing the next best thing and not thinking about them. And whilst ignorance can feel like bliss, it's not really, not in the long term. So whenever someone does something that seems to be particularly annoying or irritating, perhaps you can ask yourself, could this reflect something in me that I dislike? Or do I do some of these versions myself? The very best writers are expert observers of human nature. Through fiction, we can learn about the tiny details of thought, emotion, desire, and action that most of us miss in our mundane, frantic business way of living. Reading has been shown to help us better understand and interact with other people, keeping our brains sharp and expanding our worldviews and our growth as individuals. Stories allow us to feel connected with others and part of something bigger than ourselves, so said Melanie Green. Good fiction teaches us how to think about people carefully and with compassion. And the better we get at observing others, the more likely we are to look at ourselves the same way. Perhaps we need to make a visit to that bookstore this weekend. And what about identifying your emotional kryptonite? We all tend to have particular emotions that we are especially afraid of and try to avoid. Identifying your own personal emotional kryptonite is important because many of our bad decisions and ill-advised behaviours are the results of trying to avoid particularly uncomfortable emotions. And why not draw a timeline of your life? A timeline provides an overall vision of your life. While adding events to your timeline, it may help you recall additional events, experiences, and stories, and it becomes a useful reference for recording events and memories of your life. Good feedback is one of the fastest and most effective ways to grow and improve ourselves. While there are many aspects of ourselves that we can see needing improvement, it's the parts that we can't see that's the real problem. Perhaps others are better positioned to notice these and can help us see them. So how should we go about asking for feedback on ourselves? Well, we can start by choosing a rock-solid relationship in our lives, perhaps a parent, spouse, or even a best friend, someone with whom we have enough relationship credit that they would be willing to point out something that's negative. Start out small. Ask about something initially that's not too big or threatening. Remember to take the criticism well and avoid being defensive. Try your best to simply acknowledge their feedback, thank them for giving it, and explain you plan to work on it. Core values are the principles that guide your life. And here I shall use Marcel Craig as support on this very subject. Core values are the why behind all that you say and do. And when it comes to enhancing self-awareness, identifying these core values is key. Craig stated that when you're clear on your values, you know more about what you're seeking in life, as well as what you're not. On the other hand, if you're not clear on these values, she said that you'll engage in things that aren't beneficial to you and maybe even unhealthy. To clarify your core values, reflect on times in your life when you feel happy, uplifted, and empowered. This can help you recognize what is more meaningful to you and ultimately provide guidance for your future self. Learning a new skill is always important. Learning something new increases self-awareness by forcing us to think and act in different ways. We all become set in our ways, I think, because we end up doing the same things. And while this leads to a certain kind of comfort, it also creates narrowness of mind and thought. When the only things we're doing are things we're already good at, it's easy to be lulled into a false sense of security that we know how things work. We need to cultivate flexibility and freshness within ourselves and the way we see things. We should go out of our way to become a beginner, and one of the best ways to do this is to learn a new skill. Whether it's playing the piano, speaking Mandarin, or painting, learning a new skill is a powerful exercise in mental flexibility and self-awareness. Cognitive distortions are inaccurate thoughts and beliefs that warp how we see things and ourselves, just like we can all get into unhelpful physical habits that aren't doing us any favours. If every time I get cut off when I'm driving, I tell myself that the other person is and should be a more considerate driver, I may be missing the fact that I drive far too slowly because I'm talking to my wife and I'm not very aware of my driving skills. The point is, a major source of a lack of self-awareness is inaccurate mental habits and self-talk. If we can learn to identify these patterns of inaccurate thinking, we can become more self-aware and probably end up feeling far better about ourselves. A question for you. How often do you consider your values and aspirations? Day after day, week after week, in a constant stream of activity without much time for reflection, Is it any surprise then that we have a difficult time reaching our goals and finding satisfaction when we don't spend any time contemplating what that would even look like for us? What's more, it's probably not surprising that we end up chasing artificial goals that culture and society tell us are important, but that we don't genuinely find meaningful and rewarding. A special form of self-awareness involves becoming aware of and clear about the things that really matter to us. Why are we here? What makes for a fulfilling life that we can be truly proud of? These are big questions, and while they sound intimidating, that's probably because we don't spend much time considering them. What's more important is that you can give yourself the opportunity to think about it. Self-awareness is simply the capacity to observe ourselves, to take notice of and pay attention to patterns within our thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. And it's a skill that we all have. Some of us may have more or less of it to start with, but there are plenty of straightforward exercises anyone can take advantage of to improve their own self-awareness, no matter where it stands right now. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you soon.